This is the High School Crossfire. Welcome back.
Dear panel, I think there are two fundamental ideologies to put at the back of our heads in this particular debate. One, the way a child behaves depends on the principles of parenting that you used. Two, if we are to actually appreciate the existence of humanity on humans' ability to procreate, then leave alone the whole idea of creation, then that's a whole kind of trickle-down effect that comes along with it. So do you know that the efficiency and profitability of institutions depends on the policies and principles that govern and shape them?
Yes.
So that means you blame it on the policies.
I don't blame it on
Do
the
you
policy.
think maximization of all tax inlets in a country like Uganda, amidst the economy being vulnerable to corruption and weak policies, do you think that leaves us sort of space for tax evasion and tax avoidance? Do you think it's an efficient mechanism?
Because of the tax evasion and avoidance, that's why we have people living in those conditions, as you stated.
So don't you think the avoidance being in existence and leaving the space and loopholes depends on the policies
Exactly.
that are
You
existing?
understand the fact that the avoidance is
Up
the
your-
major cause, not the weak
Honorable,
inconsistent
up
legal
your
frameworks.
argument, not your voice. When you choose to blame tax evasion and tax avoidance respectively, what value do you create to the debate in terms of what you prompt as a solution?
I beg your pardon?
When you choose to blame tax evasion and tax avoidance respectively, what value do you create to the debate in terms of how you prompt a solution?
Like I said, we are trying to kill the whole plant, not
What
part of
value?
the plant.
What value?
We are trying to solve the problem.
Understand English.
Exactly.
Do you believe that low developing countries are uniquely vulnerable to systematic challenges like corruption and weak policies that trickle down the tax base, development, and the economic autonomy of the country?
Exactly, because the major point is
Thank
the
you.
evasion.
That's enough. That clearly shows that what these particular individuals believe, as per their fourth speaker, is that one, the weak policies or the weak sort of laws that we have in existence are the ones that sort of leave loopholes for things like tax evasion and tax avoidance to occur, right? So at the end of the day, you realize to tackle down things like tax evasion and tax avoidance, you then have to work on the legal framework, how it operates and how it is shaped. If you don't do that, that means even if you fight tax evasion and tax avoidance, you still sort of leave room and loopholes for these particular things to exist at the end of the day. That means your fight is going to be a dead-end. Why? Because these things are not going to be solved at the end of the day in any way. So on the other side as well, they also believe that developing countries like Uganda also have systematic problems, things like corruption and the weak laws that are existing, right? So that means even if we are actually to go ahead and say let's assume your side has the major cause of the low tax base, still they actually go against it and they say this particular thing is caused by the weak laws that are actually in existence. As per their second speaker, still, that's where the debate ended. Because when we asked the POI, the second speaker told us that the existing policies actually go ahead to cause tax evasion and tax avoidance. So at the end of the day, you realize still they cross to our side multiple times, but they still don't just shift their chairs to our side. Pano, you realize that the whole point of us to fight the problem from the root cause is actually us addressing problems or systematic problems that lie within the legal framework that leave space for things like tax avoidance to occur, that leave things for things like tax evasion to occur. Why? Because the legal framework addresses things like legislation, administration, monitoring, and sensitization plus implementation. So at the end of the day, if the policies we have can't cause some sort of legislation, when someone evades taxes, this is what happens to them. When we collect taxes, this is how we administer those particular taxes. If the legal framework that is existing does not cause such a thing to happen, then the tax base can never be widened at any point in time. I beg to rest my case.
I'm going to begin with a simple set of questions. So I know you have the answers, so I'll not overdo it.
Correct ones.
All right. Do you concur to the fact that tax evasion and avoidance is a more complex matter?
Because of the weak policies instead of...
Exactly. So you believe it's a more complex, meaning the weak policies are part of the problems that lead to it. Yes, no?
The weak policies shape the kind of tax system that we are living in, and
policies.
that has the tax evasion and tax avoidance.
So you concur to the fact that it's a complex matter. So I asked in a POI that would you rather kill part of the plant or the whole plant?
I think addressing problems like policies and systematic issues in government
or
in the taxation system
thank you.
is the whole idea of removing the whole plant.
Do you provide any examples of these policies?
Yes, we told you. Pay attention.
Did you provide any example of the
You
policies?
never paid attention.
Okay, so I'll go with the fact that even their own speaker doesn't know their own points. So we go with that. Is it the people's responsibility to pay taxes and not just the businesses?
By constitution, it is.
Okay, so you go with the fact that the informal tax sector should also be made to pay.
Pardon?
Should the informal economy also be made to pay?
I think it is wise for us to understand that the people working in the informal sector are people living below the poverty line. So taxing them is actually not going to change anything.
All right. So, how do you quantify the impact of tax evasion and avoidance relative to the other factors that affect the tax base, such as your weak, inconsistent tax legislative frameworks?
The legal framework actually shapes what tax evasion comes to happen in the whole game. So even the percentages or the numbers of tax evasion are still linked back to the legal framework.
Exactly. So the legal framework is also a major part in actually the whole tax avoidance and evasion.
It's not also a major part, it's the major part.
It's the major cause.
If you understand.
Thank you so much. So what do we get from team negators? One, they come here and they claim that, hey, you know what? Because of these weak, inconsistent legislative frameworks that they claim to have, then actually taxes will not be collected and there will be a low tax base. So in itself, when I asked that, is it a more complex matter, they said yes. So practically, they accept the fact that the weak, inconsistent legislative frameworks are actually part of the problems that consist to the big problem, which is tax avoidance and evasion, something they conquer too. Going into their case, they mainly talk about how if we strengthen legislative frameworks and all that. So even though we put it to that level, right, let us make them better. So if we have very effective legislative frameworks, how sure are we? They don't show us any guarantee, one. Two, they don't show us any sustainable evidence. Three, they did not come here with a mechanism to actually show us that their points stand. So why choose us? Okay. Going back to what we said, we did talk about how. And another thing that Team Negate has done is that they only come here and show you how we try to solve the problem. They don't actually show you what to blame. Something they need to come and understand with us. Going back to what we said something about how they'll reduce the revenue if that it has actually led to a lot of a reduced budget. No, a reduced. Yeah, it has led to reduced income and hence has led to people suffering, for example. Something they have conquered to something they haven't attacked. So in itself, they believe that our points stand because in itself, we did not see them attack any point to any satisfactory advantage. My first speaker did come and talk about the forms of tax evasion, right? So if tax avoidance is actually legal, as they claim, that in itself, it means that actually the legislative frameworks are actually there and they are failed. So the bigger problem actually shows you it's actually tax evasion and avoidance, not actually the weak legislative frameworks as they claim. Thank you.
So, the resolution we had today, at the end of the day, you rob us of discussions that we should have had because you're all engrossed in trying to see what causes the other. A cat running after its tail. That is what this debate was. So at the end of the day, you all end up on focusing. You know what? It's tax evasion that causes the poor implementation. So it is the major cause. No, it is weak policies and implementation that cause the tax evasion. What happened to trying to tell us that it is actually tax evasion or avoidance that causes the low tax base? What happened to you people actually telling us that it is the weak policies and implementation? The arguments of what this debate should have been end in the first speaker's speeches. The rest of you come up to justify that what I am fronting is what causes the other person's, what the other person is fronting. The weak policies and laws, definitely if we had stronger laws and policies and implementing them, then tax evasion would not exist or avoidance. Now, throughout your entire debate, I kept on asking myself, are you people hearing yourselves or you're not hearing yourselves? First speaker comes up and makes, I have no problem with first speaker's speech. Second speaker, you come up, you come up and mention your words, quoting them. Ineffective tax laws cause tax evasion. So, tax evasion causes ineffective laws. You remember what they told you? That by the time you sat down as a second speaker, that mere admission was already done. Coming back third speaker, you're asked in a POI. Then they ask you in a POI. And you say, they ask you if the laws were actually being implemented, would tax evasion exist? What do you say? If the laws were there, why would tax evasion exist? You understand that? So that is also an admission. Now, I don't know if you were hearing yourselves. The tax system, as they have said, quoting their words, is going to shape how people behave. If there were no policies such as tax holidays, if there were no policies such as whatever they are mentioning, they even point out IFRIs. They tell you that, you know what, IFRIs itself as a taxation system does not cater for people that do not have what? Let's say computers and whatnot. It does not cater for the informal sector. That alone is to show that that policy has not worked enough to serve the increase in the tax base. I don't know if I am making sense.
I think Judge Doreen has already explained to you, both of you, that your debate has been so much on whether tax evasion and avoidance causes causes a poor tax system, or whether poor tax system causes evasion and avoidance. Yet, in actual sense, for you, it should have been poor tax system, yes, causes avoidance, but also other many things that lead to a narrow tax base, right? For you, it should have been avoidance causes a narrow tax base, but also a weak system is not the cause of a narrow tax base. You get it? Now, the debate has, for like 4 speeches, we had really a debate of what causes what, and it was not contributing anything. Now, I will take you back to team burdens, because for me that's where my judgment lies. The affirmative team has a burden of proof to prove to us that tax avoidance and evasion cause a narrow tax base. The negative team has a burden of refutation for that, and they also have a secondary burden of proving a secondary burden of proof to show to us that their alternative is actually the cause of a narrow tax base. You also have a secondary burden of rebutting that. Now, team, like I already explained, most of your debate is on proof. Most of your debate is on proving what should not be proved. In this debate, we want to prove the cause of a narrow tax base. Most of both houses is on proving what causes what. Is it the evasion that causes a narrow system, or is it a poor system, or is it a poor system that causes evasion and avoidance? Now, for me, both teams fail on their burden of proof, both of you, because you spend a lot of time proving what should not be proved. Now, on the burden of refutation, the negative team, and for me, I have a problem with the approach that you have brought of a poor system, right? A poor system. I have a very big problem with it when you sort of want to engulf evasion and avoidance. But what slightly puts you on a safe position is you go beyond avoidance and evasion and provide other things that are also caused by the poor system. Now when you go to things like corruption and what, so you sort of have a slight edge of them. Otherwise, if your poor system was only to engulf evasion and avoidance, then you would not be making a difference, sort of what they have tried to highlight throughout their speech when they consistently told you that we are engulfing your case. But in as much as to some extent, you are trying to say that you're speaking about the same thing, the problem is you do not refute anything that goes beyond tax avoidance and evasion that they are talking about in the house. You don't rebut things like corruption. You don't rebut things like, you tell us that there is an entire informal sector that is not taxed. They are telling you that that is because of a policy that does not tax such people. You do not rebut those things. You do not, you just, your rebuttal is simply, we engulf you. You get it? So for me, I feel like, one, I should have started with this. This has been a very poor debate. But I feel like in this poor debate, you all fail to prove, but you rebut less.
It's not punishable for team affirmative to come and say that the alternative of team negative is already part of the standpoint we front. Neither is it punishable for team negative to come up and say that no, the standpoint that team affirmative is actually fronting is already part of the alternative we have. But what the judges are now saying, now don't leave the subject matter of the resolution, and you now begin debating on what causes what is emphasized under what, and what is as a result as to which. Yes, come and make it clear that no, we are blaming this because what you're talking about is all under this, but don't leave the subject matter of the debate. So meaning what they're trying to say that you should not now leave the fact of you proving to us that evasion and avoidance is to blame. Then you should also now not leave the subject matter of telling us that, you know what, the weak legal framework is also to blame. Okay? Then I also just want to talk about the style. Also, I want to talk about the fourth speakers. I'll start with Negator 4. You have very good questions, but then they are kind of so long. The challenge of asking a very long question in a cross-examination is that by the time you may reach halfway of the question, the person you're asking has already thought of the answer. So the questions are really good, but kind of keep them short. Simply because if they are short, you're going to limit on the time of your opponent to think, as you're going to demand for an answer in the shortest time possible. Okay? Then also, to all teams, most of the affirmative, please, when a person asks for a POI, don't just respond out of the blue. Think of it. Of course, you should not push it, but think of the answer that you're going to give, because it is always very challenging, ladies and gentlemen, to make contradiction within your cases. It's really challenging. Because, for example, now a debate like this one, we are having things like majorly to blame. If you ever come up and concede to any fact that, you know what, all we are talking about is happening because of what you are blaming, then that is a total concession. So at the end of the day, now they're asking, okay, now, why are you blaming them? And they said, don't blame what the other side is having. Is that okay? So, these are the marks I have for both teams. Style, I give you 15, I give you 14. I've explained why I've given you the 14. Content, I give you 25, 25. Strategy, I give you 25, I give you 29. In totality, it is a 65, it is a 68. So it is a unanimous judgment of 3/3 that team negative takes it. Thank you so much.